Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 165. I'm here with one of my mentors, Tom Lizotte. We've done 2 episodes already from grade 3 to grade 5, and this is our 3rd episode. If you have not listened to the last couple, they were episodes 163 and 164. I suggest you go back. This is all mix-up of music from grades 3 to 5, and we're going to be doing 3 separate programs, one at each grade level, and each one combining 3 pieces. TL, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Fine. You're the one who told me, did you make up this quote or did you get it from somewhere? 90% of success of a band happens before the downbeat of the first rehearsal.
My version of it is your fate is determined before you teach a note of music.
Okay.
So same thought.
Okay. So yeah, like just choosing the right music for your kids.
Absolutely. And I've seen that happen a lot in festival situations where you walk in and you pick up a program, whether in my situation, a lot of times I'm as a judge, they give us the programs, I'm looking it over, and I could almost tell what the bands are going to sound like because of how they're programmed. And you can tell whether the teacher really has a good firm sense of programming or it's more of a haphazard kind of situation. That prep is the thing that's it's critical, and it can't start a week before school, going to the files and just like picking, oh, there's one, there's another, and there's some people, unfortunately, that program that way. For most of us, I know Kyle feels the same way. We have these discussions all the time, and that is that you need to be planning much in advance. And whether it is like the entire year or you have in mind, I have these freshmen and seniors, they're going to, this is the end game kind of thing. Whatever your process is, it needs to be very, very serious. It needs to be ongoing. I mean, for me, the programming year sort of would get kicked off with a Midwest band clinic, and I would listen to all of the things that I hadn't heard before at the Midwest clinic. That's when it began. But by the time we got into the 1st of May, my programs for the entire year were laid out. The music was ordered, and by the time I left for vacation, I had an armful of scores to study during the summer. That's how important all of this stuff is. And one thing that I would urge every person listening to this is you need to take the process of programming very, very seriously and understand that it is an ongoing endeavor. I mean, even at this stage of my career, I'm listening to new music all the time because you never know that there's something out there. There is a hidden gem that you weren't familiar with before that would fit in a certain situation for you.
So I like to program the day after a concert, but for that concert the following year, because that concert is like fresh in my head.
Sure.
And I'll think about, okay, here's the seniors that are leaving. Here's the 8th graders that are coming up. Of course, we're in a situation working with my wife that I kind of am aware of what that group's going to come in. And I know not every situation's like that, but I'm able to kind of program that for the next year. So I sort of have a running list of the entire next year.
Yep.
I don't order them until a couple months because there's so many times that I've ordered them and then I decide to kick that piece off because I just found this other cool piece that I want to put in place of it. So, and now with the sound and score, you can do a lot of score study digitally, even if you're not actually, writing on the score. I'll also say we just did an episode 2 about how score study can give you energy. Like to me, I've found that sometimes if you're thinking about everything that's going on in the school, you kind of get beaten down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'm thinking about Aaron Copland and Down a Country Lane, it's hard to not be excited about that. So
Yes.
To me, we just did a whole episode on a bunch of pieces of this, like how I kind of go through that score study process, and like just understanding what's going on in that score is something that we so often overlook. And I'm guilty of it as well. Like you think, oh yeah, I can understand this piece and I can teach this piece. Well, do you really know what's going on in the piece?
Well, the other thing that's really exciting, and I agree with you about that. The other thing that's really exciting is to be studying a piece and all of a sudden to find something buried in the score that maybe you've conducted the piece before and it missed. And all of a sudden to make those kind of discoveries is really part of the joy of score study. I know sometimes people have a tendency, it's like, oh, this is drudgery. And I have to sit there and make a realization of every single chordal structure and every single bit of, like articulation detail or whatever. But I found that the more that I studied scores, the more interesting and enjoyable it became because I started to look at the relationships within the music rather than be thinking about the math of this chord and this measure. And I know that there's some people who do it that way, but I changed my process, and so that I was really focusing on what the relationships are. What is a conversation that the composer is having, voice to voice, in this situation? And once you start to understand that, you understand how the piece fits together a little bit better. And then you really makes you also very, very sensitive to counterpoints. And a lot of times we just say, okay, well, the saxes have that thing there that's a different line than whatever. And I don't think that composers operate that way. I think they look at it and say, there is this melodic line that's going on, and there is this the counterpoint, the counter line has a relationship not only in theoretically but also expressively and musically. When you discover those sort of things, it's like continuous uh, new insight as to what the composer had in mind.
And there's a lot of times you find a hidden note. You're like, well, that note doesn't fit in the chord. So then you get that kid to bring it out because it's a color note or wherever it might be. I also find that kids perform better when they understand more about the music. So
Yes.
yeah, the amount of stuff you take in score study, you might not use all of it that time on the piece. But when you can say, hey, what you're playing right here, this comes from this, and this is what it is, and this is why it's important,
Sure.
kids buy into that and your groups play better.
Well, that's interesting you brought that up because a lot of times when I'm in a rehearsal and there's a harmony that's a little bit dense. And so then you take a look at the score, and this is where score study is like crucial. And it's like, okay, there's a half step between the second and third trumpet right there. Now, if they don't understand what that relationship is, then they're just going to play their note, and particularly if say the half step is underemphasized, say in the third trumpet, it's an F against an E, and they play it a little bit light, it sounds like an intonation issue.
Yeah.
But if they understand the relationship, and then you have them play F, play, then E, play it together, and all of a sudden you see the expression in their face, which is really comical, like, oh, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly what it should be. If you're doing your job, that's why third trumpet, it isn't that first trumpet is the most important all the time. In this situation, you set that entire harmony. And if they understand that stuff, then they're going to perform at a much higher level. And they love that.
And if they think of themselves and the person next to them, it sounds gross, but it might be a major seven chord. And if you listen to the full band, it might be a glorious sound. And they're the major seven that you need to bring out.
Absolutely.
So they're all equally important, all the kids. So score study, score study, score study. Okay. The first piece we're going to do is by Frank Kelly. This is our grade 3 program. This is called Abracadabra. Kind of mischievous. Kind of think of like a little kid not being bad, but just kind of like magic, right? So in fact, the end, when I hear it, it's almost like the rabbit disappearing or coming out of the hat, or however that is, in a puff of smoke. Have you done this piece before?
On numerous occasions, and I love Kelly's music. I've got to tell you, this for a younger group is fantastic because there aren't a lot of undue technical demands, but there's some really, really very, very cool writing. And if you rehearse it the right way, I discovered this en route. And at one point in time, I was this was with Cape's second band, and so there's this call and response kind of thing, things lines sort of like peeking in a little like 2-note and 3-note fragments. And so at one occasion, I just happened to isolate the percussion, and the percussion parts are really, really modest. But in just hearing them alone, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on. It's like, wait a minute, this thing is a conversation throughout the band, and the percussion is part of that conversation. So rather than having like this 2/8 note figure or whatever it is, 3 notes, and the percussion not being terrifically engaged, it was like, listen, this stuff is very technically modest. However, you're part of this conversation. And then for me to be able to point that out to them, and then we put everyone together, all of a sudden the percussion section like lit up. like they had a very, very important role. They were integrally involved in the whole communication process, not I'm just hitting my drum a couple times for whatever reason. And that to me is the difference between good composers and a great composer like Kelly. He will take something that is technically very modest, and he's written a lot of technically modest music, but it always has integrity and there's always a plan and a purpose.
Yeah, and this piece falls in the category from Kelly's music too that I like to do a lot if I have a smaller percussion section. Sometimes you don't have enough players to cover other things.
Yep.
But if you have 4 players, and this is a great piece as well. So here's Abracadabra, Frank Kelly. Okay, the ballad we're going to put in this grade 3 program is Rosa Medre by Rafe Vaughan Williams, arranged by Walter Beeler. Just the fact that, well, first of all, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous Vaughan Williams music, so it's a transcription. But secondly, it's in 4/2, which is pretty awesome. Like, how many more pieces can I think of that are in 4/2?
Not many.
Not sure. It's like cut time on steroids.
Yeah. No, this is such a gorgeous piece and a really, really wonderful way to introduce your students to the music of Vaughan Williams.
This is Welsh, right? It's from Wales.
Yes, I believe so.
And you need the big reed section, big clarinet section.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. But it is a very accessible piece, and it is a good bridge if you're looking to introduce your students to the music of Vaughan Williams, a bridge piece to the folk song suite. And there's a lyricism to this that is in all of Vaughan Williams' music that is very, very arresting and very compelling. And this piece is a great opportunity for you. Once you get past the 4/2 thing, which is really not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it really isn't. It's all in the explanation initially. Once they get comfortable with that, the opportunities to shade lines and shape lines are all over this piece. It's a great piece.
Again, there's not much percussion in here. I haven't looked at the score recently, but you really need to think about what your percussionists are going to be doing, whether or not you're giving them something in addition that you create that works in the style of the piece, or if they're off with a percussion teacher or something. I would suggest you don't just sit them back there and have them cause trouble.
No, and we could talk about this for a quick second. Is it's perfectly fine to take and double up parts. For example, in the mallets, double up a flute part or whatever, and there is no necessity to have that occur in a festival. Particularly in a festival, you wouldn't want to do that, but in a concert even. But to explain to those students, this is going to be the smaller instrumentation, the original instrumentation when we play it in public or when we play it in festival, particularly in festival. But for now, we're gonna add you in on it. I think that is smart because it's a classroom management thing, and a lot of times bands will shy away from playing more transparent and not percussion centric kind of pieces for precisely that reason, for crowd control. We all deal with that, and so if you get creative, then all of a sudden you can avoid that particular dilemma, and kids are engaged. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think it gives us a little bit of a side conversation that we can have. Unfortunately, there's a lot of great music that does not get played anymore, and it's really because of the expansion of the percussion section. I mean, the percussion colors, it seems like year by year, each year get more involved and better and just more fully integrated into the overall fabric of things. But there are some pieces that were written at a time when it was bass drum, cymbals, snare, very little beyond that. And people take a look at it, it's like, well, I have all of these percussions I have to entertain, so therefore I can't play that. And one of the really unfortunate things in band programming is the fact that so little music of Frank Tikelli gets. I'm not Frank Tikelli. I'm sorry. Frank Erickson and Claire Grumman get played these days, precisely for that kind of a dilemma. I think it's honestly, it's if anything is tragic in band music, the fact that more Grumman doesn't get played at this point in time. And I know why, because as a director, that's one of the things that I struggle with. And my only solution was what we just described, in terms of, okay, we'll have kids double up on things, and it doesn't really destroy the intent of the music, and it gives them an opportunity to play stuff that should be played. It's so beautifully crafted and is such great teaching material that should never ever be something that gets in the way.
Amen. And then, okay, here is Rosa Medre by Ray Vaughan Williams. Okay, the final piece we're going to use is a contemporary piece by Andrew Boysen Jr. called Unraveling. And this piece is, I haven't heard a piece like this before, actually. His intent is that not only does every measure of the piece speed up, but every beat within the measure of the entire piece speeds up, which is really hard to do. So if your band rushes, this might be the piece for you. So it starts sort of like Bolero, how it has an alto saxophone and a solo and lots of percussion with a repetitive snare drum part. And actually, he hides the word Ravel, who's a composer of Bolero, inside that. Some things about this piece that I love teaching. First of all, like there's mouthpiece buzzing in the brass. This octatonic melody, which is this scale that alternates half steps and whole steps, and it goes throughout all the instruments. There's singing in it. There's some like half step clusters that are really cool. You need a percussionist who can really handle the snare drum, because by the time you get to the end, you're in cut time. It's like over 200 beats a minute. Yeah. They really have to be able to play. But this piece is super cool.
It's not only super cool, it's actually super accessible. And this is one that I did with the one of the young Cape groups. The kids loved it because there's that really infectious little bit of the bolero there at the beginning, and then as it morphs, throughout, they can really get wrapped up in the excitement. And as you say, like unless you have a great snare drummer and someone who's really a band that's intent in playing in time and not off to the races, it could be a little bit dangerous, but it would be like a very, very fun ride. I think this is very well written, and as you say, it is unusual. And here's the cool part about it is it's a gateway to just bring into rehearsal a recording of the Ravel Bolero, and you can explain to the students that it's the longest continuous crescendo in the history of music, I think, and get them zeroed in on what the whole vibe of it is, but also expose them to music. And yes, the title is very clever.
I was thinking about how you'd use a metronome with this piece, because obviously that's a really good thing. I forget what I've done, because you can set a program where every beat is a new tempo. Like it takes a long time to do it on a Dr. Beat or something. I wonder if anybody knows of a way to do that. Like all I've done was, like, say we're at a rehearsal mark, I'll set the tempo.
Yes.
And then I'll stop at like 2 measures in, and then I'll kind of readjust it. And then I'll set it at the new tempo at the next rehearsal, so they kind of have check-ins along the way. I wonder if there's a way to actually make your metronome just speed up.
I don't know, but what you described is way too much tech for me. Kids, don't rush.
Yeah. All right. Here is Unraveling, Andrew Boysen Jr. Okay, so our grade 4 program is going to start. We mentioned in one of the other episodes, TL, you were talking about Robert Longfield and his adaptions.
Yes.
This one is the great Leonard Bernstein piece called Slava, which he wrote, I think it was in the late 70s, and it was a political satire piece. He wrote it for, I think it was the National Symphony. I could be wrong here, but it's basically to make fun of the American politics of the day. And the original, many of us played it in college and know it is a grade 5 and really stinking hard. But this Longfield edition is a true grade 4, and it's playable. And other than the recording being a little slower than the original, I mean, you would think it was the original many times.
You really would. So the background of the piece is as you described, and it was also Rostropovich got appointed conductor of the National Symphony, and that's his nickname was Slava, and so that's was Bernstein's tribute to him and celebrating this new appointment, and so there's a lot of celebratory aspect of this music. I was fortunate recently in a residency that I did to be able to conduct this piece, and I think it's an absolute brilliant adaptation, because what you expect from this piece, if you listen to a college band play the original, you'd say, yeah, it's the same piece. It's really, really very, very well done. There's enough technique there to really make it interesting, meter shifts and all these sort of things, but that are grooves. And there's so much music that can be made, because you're talking a lot of primary colors, but primary colors voiced in such a way that it's not undue difficulty technically or anything. A band that can play grade 4 literature definitely could do this piece. And to me, it's one of those pieces. If I had a festival group to do, or if I had a group in a festival at this point in time that had a grade 4 capabilities, this would be a really, really great opener.
Yeah, it's a lot of kids, it's their favorite. It's slapstick comedy, it's cartoon, it's Bugs Bunny, the
Yep.
Roadrunner, and all that sort of stuff. It's so great. And that whole middle section of 7/8, I just love. The kid who plays the slide whistle needs to be able to count. If they can't, it's gonna be bad.
Well, yes, and the 7/8 stuff actually was from you talk about the political aspect of things. There was a failed musical that Bernstein wrote, and this was one of the pieces that was in, I think it was 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, I believe it was, and so he just like stole from himself a little bit, and that to me is one of the most endearing parts of that entire composition, when you go to and a great opportunity to teach very lyrical playing.
And if you're trying to make something funny, you have to use the soprano saxophone, of course.
Well, you do, and that's really in the overall thing. That's half the enjoyment of the piece. This band that I was working with was a good high school band, and it was interesting. I had to really work with them to get the comedy aspects, but also when things like in the bone stuff is like it's over the top. It is truly, truly over the top. And when you say to a bunch of trombone players, like, no, more, and they kind of look at you and like they'll get in trouble otherwise. And then when they finally unleash, there's how everything works together is so cool. I could just recall a quick second in that rehearsal. All of a sudden, they really hit it off of the 7/8. Excuse me. And it was a glorious moment. It's just like, this is so cool. And everyone's on the stage and they're sort of moving and just wrapped up in the moment and stuff like that. That's great music, and it's a beautiful adaptation.
Yep. Here is Longfield's adaptation of Leonard Bernstein's Slava. The middle piece we're going to put here, because the third piece is going to be two movements with a slow and a fast. So this middle piece is sort of working in that ballad realm, but not a ballad, is Spoon River by Percy Granger. And the edition you like the most, there's a bunch of editions out here, is the one that's edited by Carson and Naylor.
Yes.
Yeah. So great little piece. It's lots of versions out there. Cut time the whole way.
It is one of the Granger pieces that I think it's one of his great ones, and it doesn't get played, but very, very seldom. And this is another one of those pieces. If I had a festival band, that's why I bought the score. It's like, someday if I do a festival band, I'd like to do Spoon River. And it is folk tune-ish, but it's more American folk tunes rather than the Celtic folk tunes or English folk tunes that he writes on often. And it's kind of like a dance reel kind of thing. So it's a little bit of a bond dance situation. That's the kind of mood. It's infectious. It is very, very playable. And I think it would make a great middle section of a program.
Here's Spoon River, Percy Granger. And the third piece we're going to put on this program is Two Movements, Slow and Fast by Robert Sheldon, called Songs of Old Kentucky. Um, I heard this at UNT many years ago. There's moments of Stephen Foster, there's moments of standard band music rep. It's American folk songs. It's super funny. It like has all of these emotions throughout it. It almost runs the whole gamut.
Yeah, this is really interesting writing by Brett Carrick, and
Well, that's right. Did I say Rob Sheldon?
you did,
I
but
just did Bob Sheldon. I
didn't
apologize.
I didn't want
Grant
to
Carrick.
correct you.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
So it's been a long couple of hours
Yeah.
here. But no, this is a very well written piece. What I love about uh, this, there is really some great sonority moments in this, a great full band moments, and also a good degree of creativity. Carrick writes a fair amount of music in this particular vein. We talked about the using Stephen Foster in a number of those well-known tunes, but in this case, he treats them very imaginatively. Particularly, there is a movement that is a hoedown. It's not only a hoedown as one would expect, from a Copland viewpoint, but also there's elements of comedy in it, almost a slapstick, and definitely most creative in a lot of ways. Very, very worthwhile music.
Speaking of slapstick, I think my kids are breaking something downstairs. All right. Here is Songs of Old Kentucky, Grant Carrick. going to start this final program of this episode as our grade 5 program. This is David Maslanka's Mother Earth fanfare. It's in a fast 3/4 the entire time, pretty contemporary fanfare.
Yes, it is, and it's a really wonderful piece. This is not for the faint-hearted by any stretch of imagination, but it is so worthwhile. And what I love about this is it's not a fanfare in the traditional sense, because Maslanka's greatness as a composer, I think a lot stems from the fact that he just will take a different view of things. If something we in our mind we think of as being a fanfare, there's certain things he'll take it and use elements of that, but he'll craft it in his own way and creating music that has a lot of interest, a lot of harmonic interest, a lot of textural interest. And what I love about this piece is the insistence aspects of it, and that's what really makes it be a fanfare. He is just like pouring it on and not letting us go in this situation. This piece a few years ago, Andy Boyson did in the Maine All States, and it was just such a terrific vehicle for them. And he labored long and hard over this, and they ended up doing a really great job with it. But this is a very fine piece of music, and whatever way that you can find a way to perform Maslanka's music, even if you don't have a large band. There are pieces that are accessible, and I'm thinking that probably the best example of that for a grade 3 band, for example, would be his Rollo Takes a Walk, which is so popular for a number of years, and there are elements of comedy in it, and there's a lot that you can teach that way. But to expose your students to Maslanka's music would be just a great thing.
And a piece that we're not featuring on here just because it's just not on here, but his 2-movement work, Give Us This Day,
Yes.
Is very popular. I know a lot of people know it, but if you don't know it, that's 2 movements of very special musical experience right there.
Sure. And even in that situation, you choose maybe you don't feel you have the band to play both movements. Well, there's nothing wrong with doing music a cappella, or a la carte rather.
Yeah. Yeah. So just doing the first movement or just doing the second movement. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here is Mother Earth fanfare, David Maslanka. ballad we're going to put with this is Frank DeKelly's An American Elegy. And if you've heard this before, you know what we're speaking of. If you haven't, you really need to find a quiet place, cut the lights off, and take a listen. This was written in response to the Columbine shooting. In fact, so the story was he and Alan McMurray, who was at Colorado University, were good friends. And Alan McMurray had just been at Columbine High School like a month before the shooting, and they were working on another Kelly piece. I believe it was Shenandoah, but I could be wrong. And so he worked with the Columbine band and then left and was coming back for the concert. Well, then the Columbine shooting happened. Of course, everything shut down. Well, back then in June, they allowed the kids to get in and get their instruments and all that. They had a concert, no rehearsal, whatever. And the teacher had asked if Alan McMurray would come and be part of this concert and conduct Shenandoah. And he came on the stage and saw there was chairs, empty chairs for the kids who were no longer alive, and with roses on. I mean, he's just like, this was like the heaviest moment he had ever been part of. And so he called Frank DeKelly that night and basically said, "Look, I'd like you to write a piece because the connection of all this." And he, what he told Alan McMurray the first time, he said, "It's going to be about 2 years. I already have a bunch of stuff in line." So he said no originally, hung up, and then his wife looked at him and he said, you need to do this piece, right? So then DeKelly called all these other commissions and said, "Look, this has happened, and I'm hoping this can your piece can take a back seat." And of course, everybody was okay with that. And then the piece, and I think they premiered it the year later there or something. But it's just such a special piece of music. It's almost hard to put into words.
Yes, and as much great music as Tekeli has written, this may be his greatest piece. It's not technically all that difficult. Emotionally, it most definitely is. But when you think of what the subject matter is, it's like, oh, this is going to be really dark and it's going to be just almost depressing. No, this is music of hope. And one of my very favorite band pieces. As a matter of fact, when I retired in 2019 from the Cape Elizabeth schools, the very last piece that was on my last concert was American Elegy. It was just the statement that I wanted to leave, the statement of love that I wanted to leave with the community, and it was really a perfect vehicle for that. You could easily do it with a little bit of a lesser experienced band, and it's such valuable music in terms of having kids get in touch with human emotions. I think of what we're going through in society, and think of all of the school shootings, for example, that have happened since then, and all of the tragedy that's happened, and how on edge kids can be about the whole idea of, like, when I go to school, I'm not quite sure that I'm going to be coming home at night, kind of thing. But what I love about the piece is, yes, it has that aspect of it and it causes us to think, but it's in the end music of affirmation, and it's music of hope. And that's part of the reason that I love it so much. This is another one of my desert island concert band pieces.
Yeah, and you really need a special trumpet player. Not that the trumpet solo is hard, but it's so exposed, off stage or in the balcony or wherever it is. And you really need a player with a good tone who's reliable to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Here's An American Elegy. Thanks everyone for checking all this music out. Our final piece is actually going to be Ride by Sam Hazel, but I was actually considering using Arabesque by Sam Hazel. So even though we're not using Arabesque, if you've got a good flute player and a strong percussion section, you should listen to that piece too. Ride is just a ton of fun.
It is, and as I recall the story, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point in time, I think it was Jack Stamp that Hazel was riding through the Pennsylvania countryside for whatever reason, and Jack Stamp is driving at like 90 billion miles an hour, and just a crazy thing. And after that, Hazel said, "I'm going to write a piece that depicts that," and it is absolutely that. It's a lot of fun. If you have a better band. Kyle mentioned Arabesque. Absolutely, that's a piece in about the same difficulty level. Ride is just incredibly fun, and I had two experiences with it. One of them was when I taught at Cape with their wind symphony, and we had a great timpani player, and this kid was very enthusiastic. So we went to a festival. We played this particular piece, and he did a number on the timpani heads. And the host was hounding me for a long time afterwards to get for us to replace those heads. It was such an exuberant, but he was an all-state, a timpani player. So it wasn't that he was using bad technique. He was just using a lot of enthusiasm.
Wow.
And the band really loved the piece. And then later on, I was working with the Colts, this drum bugle corps, and one day Sam Hazo shows up at rehearsal, and it's like, and he's up there, and we're rehearsing this piece, and he was very complimentary about the transcription that had been made about it. He said, a lot of times I hear my music arranged by people and I don't recognize it, but the arranger's done a great job in this case. And then he disappeared, and I'm like, oh man, what a drag. He must not like what we're doing or whatever. And I looked down into the front ensemble, and there is Sam Hazo beating the heck out of a China cymbal during the ensemble. And it's like, oh, he must have liked it. Had the opportunity to meet him on a couple of occasions. A really very, very nice man who's contributed a lot of good literature to our bands down through the years. And this, I think, is one of his best.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Here's Ride by Sam Hazel. We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.